So to start off, we're going to go through some additional features and improvements on the unit itself. We'll go through the product overview of the new modules and the new keypads for the particular M1000 or 9000 M2 series, as well as we're going to go over the software overview. The software review, we won't go too much in detail with the unit itself, just because there's a lot of features and screens that obviously can't expand too much on. Again, I want to remind everyone, if anyone does have any questions, feel free to type in the box, as well as if anyone has any questions afterwards that you'd rather have a one-on-one, feel free to call me or email me afterwards. We can do that as well. So first, additional features and improvements. Now, what you'll notice with the new 9000 M2 series, it is a faster communication from the PC to the unit. Before, when you had the unit fully loaded up with the modules, etc., it took roughly about 5 minutes to download your programming from the software to the unit. That's now being obviously sped up quite a bit now, and that uploads in 30 seconds. So it's obviously a lot more faster, no more waiting around. Basically, everything's done a lot quicker for you. Another new feature they threw in there was a new serial port setting wizard. What this allows us to do is, when we had the unit before, we were able to connect the unit with a serial connection. However, there was no way to test that. The only way we really could kind of pretend test it would be connect the units, try to do an upload, try to do a download, and see what happens from there. Now that what they've done is added a serial port setting wizard. So basically, when you do connect your serial ports, you can click on the serial port setting wizard. It'll kind of go through a diagram how to hook it up, and it'll go through a configuration process and verify that you do have a connection there. Now, one thing we did remove was the matrix mode. Now, that doesn't actually remove from the unit itself, but physically on the back of the unit, there used to be a switch there that you flip from mixer to matrix. So now that has been removed. Everything is all consolidated into one format. So there's no powering it down, unplugging it, switching over to matrix, and then plugging it back in, firing it back up, and being in a totally different mode. Everything's all in one area now, and it's all in one mode, so you can do both configurations all from the same setup. I did mention before we do have 4 new keypads. This basically allows us to do more features and programming and setup with the unit. Some examples of that will be routing across points, configuring pages, etc. So I'll get into that obviously a little bit later on, and we'll go over a few examples as well. We do have additional speaker EQs now loaded. Before we had approximately about 16 TOA speaker EQs loaded in the older 9000 series. Now that's increased by almost double. Not all the speakers in there are in yet, but that is something that we can download in the future and add to the unit. And we can basically see the speaker EQs as well loaded on the screen when we go to that section. Some more additional features and improvements. The new telephone paging function with the ZP module. We do now have a manual audio connection, group settings, and extended connection time. I'll get into the more details of that later on. One feature I want to bring up there, obviously, is the extended connection time, where it used to be 30 seconds as a maximum limit. That's now been tweaked anywhere from 30 seconds to a maximum selection of 10 minutes. Improved GUI for PC programming. Before, everyone, I think, is accustomed to, especially on the installer end, of firing up the software and then going into different areas to program your modules, your cross points, etc. This was all done with, a window-based kind of pop-up system. It worked well when you were kind of programming it, but the one drawback was you couldn't really see what you had programmed on the prior page at the same time. This has been totally revamped. You now have basically multiple windows available on one screen. It's all nice and streamlined, all looks nice and clean, so you can basically see what you're doing to your inputs, to your outputs, to all your settings, etc., all at one time, which is a nice little great feature. We also increased the faster front panel programming. Before, obviously, anyone that's been accustomed to not having a PC or laptop with them on site, you got to get the job up and running, and you're kind of going through the menus in the front panel was a little bit cumbersome. They've removed quite a bit of mostly up-down kind of side arrow functions that we had to press before to get into or within a certain menu. That has been totally basically removed. It's a lot more one button, two button presses, and you're right where you want to be. So that's been increased, obviously, the time and basically corrected from there. The vacuum fluorescent display feature, This has been added as well, so now after 20 minutes of non-use, the units will basically go into a sleep mode. Still works, of course, no problem, but the front display will have a scrolling text saying, plus any key to continue or to open up your program configuration. Just something nice to keep it obviously a little less noise in the front panel and keep it, people maybe not from prying eyes going in there and taking a look at what's going on. Now, it is compatible with our current modules and keypads. This is something that obviously everyone wanted to keep and go forward with. So it is backwards compatible. You'll have no issues plugging in any of the D modules, T modules, etc. that we currently have. That's weird. Okay, so back to training there after my little bathroom break. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're going to go through the product overview. Now, obviously, we got the model line up there of the 6 models that we currently carry on the new M2 series. The 960S, 9120S, the 9240S. They're single power output units at 60, 120, or 240 watts, as well as gives you a line output to feed external amplifier. You all got our popular 960DH series and the 9120DH. That's a dual channel 60 or 120 watts version, as well as our very popular M9000 M2, which is strictly a mixer only. There's no power output on that, but it does give you the 2 line outputs to feed your amp. Of course, these are fully compatible with all modules. Now, I did mention we do have the new modules, which you'll see below here. Start off with the RC001T. Now, this is our new keypad module. You will need this if you are using the following 4 new keypads. Do keep in mind as well, this does go into a module slot, so you will lose 1 slot, anywhere from 5 on, so basically your output modules at that point, if you add this. So you won't get maybe your full 8 zones if you're looking for that plus this keypad module. So keep that in mind if you do use these keypads. Well, we have the 9011, 9012, 913, 9014. Obviously, from looking at the pictures, you can see different units have different values associated to them, be it volume, button control only, or both button with volume control. You also notice we get the LED indication now on these units, which kind of gives you a nice new visual presence of when you're pressing or activating a button, function feature, etc., or turning or adjusting your volume up to a certain level where people might want to be happy with at that level. They can visually see that. So a little quick chart here of basically the old and new, the current 9000 series, which is going to replace now by the M2. You can kind of take a look at the chart here and go through it here yourself. I'll go through basically the features and functions later on as well, but I'll go through this chart here to kind of give everyone an idea of what has been either removed or added to it. So a number of presets on the older system where there's 32 scenes or 32 events. That was done either from mixer or matrix mode. We now have 32 scenes, but plus 32 paging events. Again, this is incorporated all into one user interface and all from the front panel program as well. Again, no switch it will be needed to turn it from mixer to matrix mode. Number of operating modes, like I mentioned, it used to be 2, mixer and matrix. Now mixer and matrix is combined, so it's basically one feature set out of the box. Now paging priorities have been reduced from 8 down to 4. One of the reasons for this was basically we never really got into jobs where we had more than, say, 4 paging priorities, or basically 3 is a 1, 2, 3 level, and then as a background music. So basically they've reduced that down to 4 to give it more of a streamlined approach. Maximum number of remotes on the older system was 4. That was again using with the C001T. Now with the new M2 series we can do up to 20. Which is obviously greatly enhances your setup and controlling functionality of any system that you decide to go with. Display speaker EQ presets. That was a feature in the 9000 older series that when you selected a preset from the speaker EQ that was preloaded, for example, F122s, it wouldn't actually show you that EQ curve in the chart. Even though the chart was there, it would just show you a flat line. That's been fixed and upgraded, so now every speaker EQ that TOA has employed into the software will now be shown on the chart as well. So I mentioned your different paging modes with the ZP module. Before was basically a 1 Paging mode, you dialed in, did your button configuration presses, and basically did your page. Now we have 3 different modes. We have the manual, auto, or group. Again, I'll get into that shortly, which again obviously enhances the product value of this unique product we have here. Programming, the newer GUI obviously is a lot more streamlined. You'll see that in a few moments here. A lot easier to use. I definitely prefer it over the old one. Usable remotes, we currently have the 3 units, the 9001, 2, and 3. Again, you had to have the C module in there if you're using the 9003. This has obviously been tweaked a little bit. You can still use the current remotes if you like, but we also have the 4 new ones which you can do a lot more functionality with. And get down to the last 2 here, the button functions. Basically, that's on the remote itself. You had your volume up, down, channel on, mute, etc. On the current units, this has been basically enhanced a little bit. We can do the relay activation, we can change your cross point assignments, and we can also activate pages. Lastly, configuration file formats. It used to be a mix or matrix file. That was kind of a little bit tricky when you were searching. If you had it in the wrong mode in the software, you're trying to find that file on your hard drive that you thought you had it in mixer mode, but it was actually matrix. You have to switch back and forth. Now that's all basically one .mx2 file. All right, so the keypads in the module. So the RC01T keypad module basically will handle 16 remote keypads. You can do these in any configuration you want. So you can have multiple types of keypads you want to go with. It's really up to you. If you take a look at the module itself there, you'll see the 2 black terminals there. That's your power input. So this module will require power to power the keypads. Basically, for the first 8, you need 1 power supply, and obviously the second 8, if you did all 16, you'll need 2 power supplies. Keep that in mind when you are ordering this product, that you'll need this module for those keypads, as well as a power supply. Again, might be 2, depending on how many keypads you go with. You'll see the units again there, the 911, 912, 1314. Again, different button configuration setups with volume, without volume, and like I mentioned before, you can use these in combination and have, say, a button configuration with a volume control on the side. These require Cat5 shielded cable, so make sure if you do a job, it is shielded. That's the only way it'll work properly for you. All right, so keypad functions. Again, this will be on the new unit itself. Like I mentioned, we could do additional controls here, such as scene changing and loading, which we could do before. But another key feature that we can now do is the cross point. We can actually change our cross points. What that means essentially is now I can actually, by the press of a button, pull, say, certain inputs to my desired output. This is all done by just pressing the button on and off. Press the button once to turn that cross point on, press it again to turn it off. Now you can do this either based on individual cross points, i.e. individual sources. By pressing the 1 button, only triggers that 1 source at a time, and that's it. Or we can do it as a whole gang of sources, for instance. So I can have, say, source 1, 2, and 3 come on by pressing button 1 and send that to output 3, 4, 5. You can also do initiate paging on this. A nice little feature if you're doing microphone paging. Now with this, we can have our initiate paging buttons to activate a group or a zone of outputs or on the unit itself by pressing a button and then paging through the microphone. We can change our contact outputs if we want to toggle on, for instance, strobes, that kind of stuff. And we can also have units with individual input or output volume if it's so equipped. Now, obviously, you only get your volume control on these units if you have the volume knob. Currently, the buttons will not activate the volume control feature. Only the units, keypads with volume control knob will activate your volume. So keep that in mind. Now, one other new feature these keypads have with the volume control is before, in the current ZM series units, we were only able to assign either 1 input or 1 output to that volume knob. That kind of got tricky, especially when you had, say, 6 outputs. You want to have a master volume control. You'd use the current ZM series volume controls, but you're only able to pick 1 output. So if you had the 6 zones, they're all sharing the same kind of level, it'd be kind of tricky to get by that. With these units, you can, again, assign any inputs or outputs, whether it be 1, 2, 5, whatever you want to do, to that volume knob. So nice little new feature there. Again, mentioned before, LED indication and level button activation. All right, so this is a little bit into the software menu quickly here, just to show you something here. What you'll see here, this is a keypad setup for the ZM9014. So what you'll see is when you go into the menu for this keypad, you'll see the picture there of the keypad you want to go with. So you know which one you're working on. I'll make sure it's the right one. And then you go into your function select at the top there. So you'll see, as an example, button 1 there. I've done it to change scene. So with that, by pressing that button, I can load my scene. In that case, I'm loading scene 1. Button 2 I have set up there as change cross points. So now you'll see as when I press button 2, and that little box to the right of that, I'm taking input 1 to output 1, and I'm also taking input 2 to output 2. Button 3 we have set up as initiate paging. I press that, I can initiate page to a zone I want to go to. And button 4, I can change my contact output, which is a level signal, to output 1. And right below that, obviously, you'll see now is your input-output volume setup with your LED indication. And again, from there, you can do single or multiple units. Now, you may be wondering, how do you wire these up? It could be home run or they daisy chained. Basically, you can do both. Depending on what configuration you go with, you can do either, again, home run to each unit, or you can just go from keypad to keypad. So this example here shows you the module with 2 power supplies because we have 16 keypads, and the wiring configuration in this example. Now, distance is limited to 2,624 feet if you wired it in this particular format. So depending on how you go into a job, you might have existing cable there that's maybe not home run or is home run. Whatever way it is, you can do basically both ways, which I'll show you here in the next slide here. So here's the other example I'm going to show you here. This is basically going to be your keypads going from keypad to keypad in this example. If you did this way, you're going to be reduced your distance quite a bit. I mean, 656 feet from the first to the last keypad basically is still quite a good distance. That should hopefully cover most jobs. Again, if it's not, if you can, home run them for sure. Also, it'd be a lot more distance for you. But you can get an idea now of the way the engineers are thinking, because especially existing wiring, you might not have that capability where you might have to tap into existing Cat5. In this case, you can do that and just go from keypad to keypad. Now you may be wondering, how do you configure the keypads? So each one of these units has a little dial on the back of the unit for the address. So again, you have 16 available numbers and characters here to choose from. Each keypad will have to be assigned an address. If it's wrong, obviously you'll get the fault error on the front of the unit right away, and it won't work until you correct that. Another thing to keep in mind as well is when you do add the keypads and the module to the system, and you fire it out for the first time without programming it, obviously you will get the fault message. That's standard. The fault message will be there basically until you program your keypads. It's basically just saying and remind you, listen, you haven't done any programming here. What do you want to do to the keypad? And it won't do anything beyond that until you basically set that up in the software. There's a little picture of the terminal connection there on the left-hand side. You've got your in and out there basically with your power and your communication level. So basically that's the ZM9014 you're looking at there. Again, different keypads are different sizes, but they all have the terminal connection on the back for in and out. And again, mixing and matching these is not a problem. Just make sure you address it properly, and you're basically good to go from there. All right, so the ZP paging module. Now, I mentioned before we have some new modes with this. Essentially now we have an auto setup. So basically what you can do is when you press activate your PBX to go to your phone system, you have it set up to auto. So now it's going to basically be a pre-programmed area you want to page to without you dialing and go to that area by itself. Excuse me. So now this basically reduces people from picking up the phone, hitting the page button, dialing *1 or hit zone 1, etc. You're basically skipping all that functionality because you pre-programmed that before. So when the phone is activated and the page button's hit, that ZP module is going to route it to that particular zone every time. You still do have the manual one as well. That was the same as before, so you can do your individual zones, you can do your groups, etc., and basically go from there. But the only downfall, I guess you can say, is when you did your groups, you still have to do your 0, 1, 2, 3, and then your page. So it's a little bit more cumbersome before. That's where we get into the next point here, is your group function. Now, with the press of a button, we can have predetermined groups. Again, this is all done in the software, so that any predetermined group can be set up beforehand, and now it's a simple 2-button press. You go to that group you want, hang up, and you're done. We still have the contact closure activated when the page is initialized. And the one thing we got a lot of text asking for is adjustable connection time from 30 seconds to 10 minutes. Now, people may be wondering why you want to do that. This came up particularly when people had a pre-recorded message that was longer than that. So they'd access their PBX, go to the area they want to page to, and that pre-recorded message would play. But sometimes that pre-recorded message was beyond 30 seconds, so it would get cut off. This has now been basically tweaked from 30 seconds or 10 minutes. So you have that variable selection there for you to use. The paging level now has its own volume control. It's a nice little feature. Now, for each output zone we have, we can actually have our own level of volume. So now it's going to be totally independent of our set volume of our outputs for your sources and mics. This will be a totally independent paging volume. It's a nice little feature to go from there. All right, here we go to the software. So it's a whole totally brand new GUI. It can only be used currently on the M2 series, so it's not backwards compatible. You can't use it with the older system, so if you try downloading it, it won't work, unfortunately. So keep that in mind. If you still have the existing units out there, you have to still have the existing software. Again, multiple menus are now available on one screen. It has a separate menu for keypads, so that's all done independently. Speaker EQ is now shown on the graph. And initial setup allows you to pull last file used. It's a nice little feature when you fire it up, you can pull last file and go from there. We also have the serial port setting wizard, sorry, which we can tweak and go from there. Okay. Now we get the start menu. Excuse me, guys. Losing my voice here. Let me just grab a drink of water here. Basically, this slide will come up first when you do fire up the software. It's basically asking you, do you want to go into your older file or do you want to create a new file? You can also do your serial port setting wizard. You can download direct from the 9000 to PC, and you can change the file name anywhere you want. My lovely assistant Peter came here with a nice drink of water for me as I finished my current drink of water. Thank you, Peter. That was refreshing. Thank you, Peter. Okay, so the next menu you get to in your setup is your inputs. Now, before this was done in a different setup on the original software. Now, basically, you're forced to start off here, throw on your modules, throw on your output modules, rename everything you want, and then you'll get to the next screen, which we have the multi-menu GUI. So here's our brand new GUI. So now you'll see on the left-hand side, we got your scene, save, and setup. We also have your inputs at the top and your outputs. And we also have your level control at the bottom. And now the cool thing is, when you change your inputs at the top there, your volume, your EQ, your compressor, etc., that all populates down to the bottom screen. So now you're not left with a window popping up and forgetting what you clicked on. This all shows right below in the lower level. So it's a great little feature. Doesn't matter where I click on it, it'll show right below there. So like I mentioned before, you click on a different section. For this example, I clicked on cross points. And you'll basically see that at the bottom level there. So now once I click on the cross point section, my window at the bottom has changed. And now I'm viewing my cross point section where I can do your on and off toggles and basically activate any cross point setup I want to go to from there. Here's an example of our ANC level adjust. This will be for our AN series ambient noise microphones. This will change a little bit where you get your level and range. We also have now your ANC adjust, which you can actually get your level based on the level in your room, set it the way you want, and tweak it from there. I did mention before as well the ZP settings. Again, all I got to do is click on the ZP settings tab, and right below now you'll see I got your manual audio group setup, your mode, which is paging ports or ring signal, and then your connection type. And once you go to that menu, you click on the paging tab, and now you get your volume output. Now again, this is totally independent of your main volume. This will be your individual paging volume based on your ZP module itself. So nice little feature. You can actually make this a lot louder than you want to your other levels, or a lot less softer. All right, as mentioned before, we got our paging priority settings. Oops, sorry about that. So basically, we got 3 levels of priority: 1, 2, 3. 1 being the highest. And again, this is totally separate from your scene setup, so you can save this independently and be totally separate from your scene setup, as well as you have your ducking level from 0 dB to off. So depending on how many inputs you want to have to the paging setup, you can just tweak them here. Populate this window and basically assign your values as you need. Okay, now we got our mic and phone group paging, as I mentioned before. It's a great little feature here now, so now we can actually assign different groups and zones to individual either button presses on the keypad or on the ZP module itself. You'll see there the first 4 there of my inputs. That's all been assigned to my microphone. And I'll also assign that to a keypad. So when you press keypad button 1, for example, it goes to output 1, 2. You press keypad button 2, that goes to output 3 and 4, and so on. So I can either have any group setup, any zone setup I want, all by pressing a button on the keypad with a microphone. We also got our ZP module right below that. That will be our groups assigned there, as an example, for your phone paging module. So now when they activate that group, you're not activating one zone, you're actually activating a whole group. Again, this is a totally new feature here. Actually, can do quite well because a lot of jobs, people kind of go overboard with the button pressing because they forget the configuration of groups. This way, you get done beforehand. You can load it any way you want and basically allow the user to program and set it up any paging reference they want. All right, so you get the remote control wizard. So from example before, there's a 4-button keypad. You'll see there the first 4 buttons. That's where I'm initiating my page. Basically, by a simple press of the button, I can change my paging zones for this example with my microphone. The second keypad here, what I've done here is basically assign the output volume only on the side to channels 1, 2, 5, and 6. Like I said before, you can do this in any configuration you want, any outputs you want, or inputs you want. And here's the 8-button controller with this example of button pressing. The first 4 there I've done is basically changing my scenes, pretty similar to before of the older ZM series. I've also changed my contact outputs with the rest of the buttons to activate different outputs, either by toggling on off or this flat 1-button press on, 1-button press again to turn it off. All right, and then here's where you change your cross points again. Now you see in the top right window there, you got your inputs. You have my change cross point. Basically, even though it only shows, say, in3 out 1, in3 out 2, etc., it actually doesn't fit everything in there, but when you do that pull-down menu, it will show all your input-output values assigned to that button. So keep that in mind if you think that you've skipped that. Just click on that pull-down tab and you will see that afterwards. And again, in this example here, I've chosen to activate or control my input volume only on all 4 inputs. Now you may ask, how do you do your cross-point setup? So on the previous screen there, we saw our inputs 1, 2, 3, etc. going to different outputs. This is what comes up in a different little window here. What it's allowing me to do now is turn single or multiple inputs on and route inputs to different outputs. So in this example here, I've got my input on channel 3 going to output 1 and 2 and also output 5 and 6. And as you note there as well, I'm not going to output 3 and 4 with that channel 3 input. But however, channel 4 button, when I press that button, I'm skipping buttons or outputs 1 and 2 and 5 and 6, but I'm routing that input to output channel 3 and 4. Here's a quick little example here of a phone page. Obviously, your phone system going into the 9000 via the ZP module. This would be a quick example of, say, an auto phone page setup. You pick up a handset, activate that PBX, and once you set up as auto page, it goes to that particular zone or group of zones or all call as you set up originally in the software itself. Now here's an example of the group page. Now this one here, you only see group 1 activated, zone 1. But I can also have it configured to say when I press this button configuration that I've predetermined, either be, for example, say a #2, I can have that go to zone 1, 2, and 3. I can have that go to zone 1, 2, 3, 4, or zone 1 and 4. And again, that's all done in the PC programming. Now here's an example here of multiple rooms and controls. Now a lot of people ask, well, if you want to do multiple rooms, and I want to be able to pull different sources, and I don't want to hear other sources, etc., we can now do that with the newer keypads. So as you see here, we have the 4 rooms all throughout a building, and all these rooms now, again, depending on what keypad you go with, can pull their multiple sources. You also share the same source as well, so you won't have a problem there going to different rooms if you want to share a source. If you do share sources, keep in mind that if you don't, I wouldn't assign obviously the input volume to those to that actual source, because it will affect, it is global on the input volume side, so it will affect all the input volume across the board on the input side there. Now you also notice there on the right hand side of 5th keypad, that can be used as, per se, a master type keypad, where say you want to have scene override, you can tuck that one away in the back room, etc. Now the master keypad doesn't actually blow out or delete any scenes from the other system. So all those 4 keypads there will work independently. And if you did do a master keypad, just keep in mind it doesn't actually blow out or erase any of the memory. It's still there and still active. But you can use that master keypad obviously for different functions and different features. And lastly here, a quick room combining setup. A lot of people ask, we've got 2 rooms, they're split. We've got a hallway, hall B. Sometimes they want to open that fake wall up, slide it back, and now we have one giant room. So this can be done obviously with the newer keypads. You can have a keypad in each room assigned, again, certain inputs, have that volume control that room only. But when the room is combined, you might want to remove that wall, of course, keep everything combined, and only pull a few sources. So again, this is where the configuration comes in handy, where maybe you want to put a master keypad in there to assign to the input volume and adjust your gains and maybe reroute different sources. And again, keep in mind those existing keypads will still work and will still activate and control sources. At this time, they do not get erased or blown out when you do, let's say, the combined state. That's hopefully something that might come in the future. But so keep that in mind when you're doing multi-room configurations, that all the keypads will still activate and control their sources. And I think that's it. Thank you for attending.